Hello and welcome to another Premier League preview. Today we'll be covering Liverpool against Leicester, which is an 8 PM televised kickoff on Boxing Day. Really looking forward to this game. Both teams have plenty to play for completely different reasons. Both are battling at either end of the table, and I've got quite a few high value angles to cover in this video. Starting off with the predicted lineups. For Liverpool, they obviously decimated Spurs 6-3 away in their previous game, so I don't see them making too many changes to that 11. Potentially Curtis Jones comes in for Szoboszlai in that sort of attacking midfield role. We have seen Arne Slot do that throughout the season so far, but just based on how strong Szoboszlai's performance was on the weekend, I would imagine Liverpool opt for an identical 11. They haven't got too many injuries to contend with, so every reason for Slot to just go for as strong as possible 11 for this one. For Leicester, it's a bit more complicated. They have obviously Ndidi's out, Ricardo Pereira's out, but Harry Winks did return for the second half against Wolves, replacing Oliver Skipp. I would imagine Winks starts from the start alongside Soumare in midfield. That's an interesting duo, and I'm going to talk about those two a bit more later. But for Leicester, potentially we see Ayew start on the right wing again, as he did in the last game against Wolves, but I'm not expecting too many changes from them either. Leicester have lost their last two games by a 7-0 margin against Newcastle and Wolves. That came after a pretty decent start under Van Nistelrooy as manager, in which they beat West Ham 3-1 and then took a point off Brighton. In their last two, however, they've looked really toothless, and it's been sort of worrying performances. If we just look into how they've performed under their new manager so far, we can see that their shot counts are obviously very low. Against Newcastle in their only away game, they managed just 0.25 expected goals, so it's a pretty dreadful performance on that front. And if we look into their shots conceded, they're averaging 20.5 shots conceded over the 4 games where Van Nistelrooy has been the manager, so very notably high number there. And the reason being is because Leicester obviously do or have been deploying a very deep block. They've been sort of inviting pressure, and in their only away game, they lost 4-0 to Newcastle and conceded 27 shots, 4.13 XG, so it could have even been a bit more than that. If we now think about their trip to Anfield, St James's Park is probably the most similar game to that one, so it's sort of no surprise that Liverpool come in as heavy favourites. They're actually given a 2.75 handicap by the market, so heavily favoured. And the first angle for me is to try and get Liverpool to win onside. Now, just based on how poor Leicester have been in their last 2 games in terms of actually creating chances, one sort of angle that pops out to me is Liverpool to win 2-0. And you can get that at 1.86 with Bet365. So by doing Liverpool to win and both teams to score no, that comes out at 1.86. And again, just based on how Leicester are expected to approach this game, I expect them to play a very deep block. And I think Liverpool sort of thrive against those kind of teams. I don't think Leicester have a particularly strong threat on the counter. Obviously, they have Jamie Vardy, but if you think of how strong Joe Gomez and Van Dijk have been as a partnership, they definitely have the tools to sort of nullify that threat. And I do think in this game, Liverpool are the massive favourites. And to think if they are given a 2.75 handicap, you'd imagine a clean sheet is very likely. Now, I've obviously touched on the fact that Leicester have been conceding sort of large shot counts since Van Nistelrooy has been manager, and that the Newcastle game was the most similar to this Liverpool game at Anfield. So if we look into how sort of shots were distributed throughout the Newcastle 11, we can see that Alexander Isak had 3 shots on target, 4 shots in total. But perhaps more interestingly, Bruno Guimaraes had 2 shots with 1 on target. Joe Linton had 3 shots in total with 2 on target. And Sandro Tonali also had 3 shots, but with 0 on target. So all of the midfielders did find some success in the attacking third. And it makes sense. If Leicester are obviously to sit deep, you get these midfielders invited into better areas, potentially in and around the box. And therefore, shooting chances will naturally arise. In addition, Dan Burn also had 2 shots. Neither were on target, but both were from set pieces. So if we are to target Liverpool players 4 shots, which I think is quite a natural thing to do, the shot line is very, very high for this game. So naturally, sort of move into looking into the player markets. Those are the players we want to be targeting. We want to be targeting the set piece threats, so Van Dijk, and the midfielders. Looking into Liverpool's shot data at Anfield this season reveals that a few players are potentially a bit risky to target. For example, Ryan Gravenberch, he's had just 5 shots all season at Anfield. Same for Van Dijk. I think his data is probably the most surprising. He seems to see an uptick in shots in sort of bigger matches, but on the whole, he tends to blank. If we were to get sort of Van Dijk on side, he's priced at 1.44 for a shot, so pretty short. But by pairing that with sort of Liverpool corners, you can add over 6.5 Liverpool corners to get that to 2.0. So again, asking for quite a lot. So I'm probably leaning towards avoiding Van Dijk and Gravenberch's shots here. However, McAllister is a bit more intriguing. So obviously his shot data is nothing particularly notable, 1.13 per 90, but it is an ideal matchup. And you can see that his shot on target percentage is ridiculously high from this data. Also, he scored in his last game against Tottenham, so that is something else to sort of consider. The other player that I would like to back or get on side is Szoboszlai. Again, his data at Anfield this season, nothing to sort of write home about, but he looked fantastic last time out against Spurs, seemed really full of confidence, had 6 shots in that game with 2 on target, could have scored a few goals. And I think if he is to start again in that sort of attacking midfield role, should see plenty of chances around the sort of edge of the box where he tends to shoot from. So getting Szoboszlai and McAllister on side for this bet would be ideal. If we move over to looking at the prices, McAllister is 2.62 to register 2 or more shots, which I think is very, very big. I think that's the first angle that really comes to mind. Szoboszlai is much shorter, 1.5 over 1.5 shots. So if we look into these shots on target markets, Szoboszlai's shot on target looks a bit better, 1.8. Alternatively, Curtis Jones, same price. If he is to start in that same position, could look at one of these 2 prices. And McAllister is 2.5 to register a shot on target. I would say this price, the McAllister one, is probably the best bit of value in the shot markets. For the third and final section of this video, I'm going to go through 2 players who I think will start in the pivot for Leicester at Anfield, and that is Harry Winks and Soumaré. Starting with Soumaré, he sort of emulated the role of Wilfred Ndidi since the Nigerian has been ruled out injured. And if we look into Ndidi's tackle numbers, which is shown on the screen, see he's averaging a notable 3.61 per 90, so tasked with getting a sizable amount of duels. And Soumaré has sort of emulated that role under Van Nistelrooy. He started 3 out of 4 games. The only game he missed was when he was suspended, and he's played the full 90 in every game. So playing the full 90 at Anfield, I think he's a one to target for duels, fouls and tackles. Interestingly, he's actually been booked in all 3 games under the new manager, which potentially suggests that the system is asking a bit too much of him. He's finding himself exposed at times at having to commit cynical fouls. With that in mind, Bet365 are priced at 1.44 for him to commit a foul, and that looks a pretty solid price. But for this one, I'm actually a bit more interested in his tackle prices. So Soumaré is priced at 1.5 to register 2 or more tackles. Obviously, that's a bit too short to play as a single, but I just think there'll be plenty of opportunities against Liverpool for him to tackle. There'll be plenty of duels for him to sort of contest in that midfield. And Harry Winks, who is expected to partner him, is actually priced at 2.1 to register 2 or more tackles. So just straight away, for a midfielder at Anfield, that is a massive, massive price. If we look into Harry Winks' data this season, it perhaps explains why the price is as high as it is. He's averaging just 1.4 tackles per 90. He hit this line in 4 out of 10 starts, so nothing particularly notable. But he's played just one half of football under Van Nistelrooy, which was in the last game against Wolves. As I said, I expect him to come into the lineup in place of Skip, as he did against Wolves in that game. And he made 2 tackles in just one half. So, again, potentially is tasked with a bit more defensive duties under the new manager. And against Liverpool at Anfield, it's just a perfect matchup to target. So finally, just to recap all the bets I've gone over in this video. First of all, Liverpool to win to nil at 1.86. Then Szoboszlai to register a shot on target at 1.8. McAllister to register a shot on target at 2.5. Or McAllister 2 or more shots at 2.62. And then finally, Winks to have 2 or more tackles at 2.1. And Sumari to have 2 or more tackles and a foul, which comes out at 2.15. So plenty of potential angles here. All of the bets are currently with Bet365. Best of luck for any bets you decide to go with. I hope you all have a fantastic Christmas period, and I will see you all on the weekend.